Sometimes the only way to keep your dignity is to make sure the people who stole it never see you flinch. Lorraine Vey had exactly 3 things left to her name the night. Her stepbrother handed her over like a line item in a ledger, a cracked phone with 17% battery, a wool coat that smelled like her mother's old apartment, and the particular kind of exhaustion that comes not from too little sleep, but from too many years of being the wrong kind of person in the wrong kind of family. She didn't cry when Bennett walked her up to the black SUV, idling outside the warehouse on Cartier East. She'd already done the math. The Vey family owed Caulfield's organization $460,000. Give or take the interest that had been compounding quietly for 2 years, while Bennett gambled and their stepfather drank, and Lorraine worked double shifts at the accounting firm on Saint Laurent, entering numbers into spreadsheets that weren't hers, trying to hold together a household she'd never asked to be part of. She was 26. She had a college diploma in financial administration, a bad shoulder from sleeping on a fold-out, and she was being walked toward a man who ran half the port of Montreal. The SUV's rear door opened before anyone knocked. The man inside didn't look at her immediately. He was reading something, paper, not a phone, which she noticed because it was strange, and he finished the sentence before he looked up. His name was Caulfield, just that. Whatever his first name was, nobody in the building that night used it. He was older than she'd expected. Not old, but weathered in the particular way of men who have spent decades making decisions that couldn't be undone, the kind of quiet that comes from having run out of surprise at what people will do for money. There was a scar along his jaw that disappeared into the collar of a dark shirt. He had the hands of someone who still did things himself when he had to. He looked at her the way a person looks at a column of numbers they already know don't add up. "Vey," he said. "That's my name," Lorraine said. "Not my choice." Something shifted in his expression. Not warmth, more like recalibration. Bennett was explaining from outside the door, voice running fast and apologetic, something about the debt and the arrangement and how Lorraine was sharp, good with books, could be useful, not a liability, how this was better for everyone. Lorraine did not turn around. She watched Caulfield's face instead, and she could tell he wasn't listening to Bennett any more than she was. "Get in," Caulfield said. She got in, not because she had a better option. Because standing in the cold, outside a warehouse in the Pointe St. Charles, arguing with her stepbrother at 11 at night was not a better option. Because she had done the accounting. Because sometimes the math only goes one direction, and you either accept it or you freeze to death pretending otherwise. The door closed. Bennett's voice cut off. The SUV moved. Lorraine sat with her hands in her lap and her coat buttoned to the collar, and she did not say anything for 6 blocks. The city moved past the tinted windows, the neon of a pharmacy, the orange stutter of a construction light, a woman walking a dog at an hour that seemed optimistic. "You know what this is," Caulfield said. It was not a question. "I know what Bennett told me it was," she said. "I assume those aren't the same thing." He looked at her again. That same recalibration. "The debt is real." "I know the debt is real," Lorraine said. "I've been servicing it for 14 months out of my own salary. I have the transfers if you want them. I also have the original loan documents that your people drew up without disclosing the compound rate, which in Quebec is a violation of the Consumer Protection Act, in case that's useful context." Silence. "You looked it up," he said. "I look everything up," she said. "It's a habit." The SUV stopped outside a building that had once been an industrial loft and was now something else entirely. Not the kind of place people outside certain circles knew the address of. Inside it was warmer than she expected. Not soft, nothing about it was soft, but not the cold fluorescent chaos she'd been bracing for. High ceilings, a long table with actual chairs, a kitchen that had real appliances. 2 men near a door who looked at her and looked away. A woman in her 50s with close-cropped grey hair and the posture of someone who'd worked security before this met them in the hallway. Her name was turned out to be Price. She looked at Lorraine the way you look at something you've been told to figure out. "Room 4, Caulfield said. "Full access to the east wing. Not the lower level." Price nodded and looked at Lorraine. "You eat?" Lorraine said she hadn't since lunch. She got a bowl of lentil soup that was better than anything her step-family had ever served, and a room with a real lock on the inside of the door. She sat on the edge of the bed and ate and looked at the wall and tried to figure out what kind of equation she was now part of. She woke at 6 from habit and lay in the dark for a moment, listening to a building she didn't know. Pipes, ventilation, someone moving in a room above her, the specific silence of a place that stays staffed all night. She dressed and went to find coffee and found instead a man named Greer, mid-30s, working at a table covered in what appeared to be shipping manifests organized by date. He looked up at her, without surprise, which told her Caulfield had briefed people. He pointed at the kitchen without being asked. She made coffee and came back, and looked at the manifests without being invited to. "These are off," she said. Greer looked up. "The tonnage on the Halifax route," she said. "You've got it logged as 240 per shipment, but the fuel expenditure on the same dates implies closer to 310. Somebody's either skimming weight or the records are being falsified downstream." Greer stared at her. "I have a diploma in financial administration," she said. "I'm not trying to make your morning difficult. I'm just telling you what I see." He went and got Caulfield. Caulfield came in still pulling on a jacket, which told her it was early even for him. He stood across the table and looked at the manifests and then looked at her. "Show me." She showed him. It took 11 minutes. He asked 3 questions, and she answered all of them without hedging, because she'd already verified her logic twice in her head, and she didn't see the point in performing uncertainty she didn't have. When she was done, he looked at the documents for another moment. "Sit down," he said. Not unkindly. She sat. "You understand what you're in," he said. "I understand that Bennett traded me for a debt I didn't incur," she said. "I understand that I don't have a lot of leverage right now. I understand that you could have put me somewhere much worse than a room with a lock on the inside and Price making sure I ate last night. I'm trying to figure out what that means." "It means you're not a guest," he said, "but you're not a prisoner either." "Then, what am I?" He looked at the manifests. He looked at her. "Undecided," he said. The first week was careful. She stayed in the East Wing. She ate with Price and a man named Arlo, who had a bad knee and managed the building's logistics, and occasionally with Greer, who had begun leaving documents near her coffee cup in the morning with a studied casualness that she found almost charming. She found 3 more discrepancies by the end of the week. A payroll account running through a numbered company in Alberta that had 2 names on it that didn't correspond to anyone she'd met or seen referenced. A fuel expense for a vehicle that hadn't moved, according to the maintenance logs, in 11 months. A legal invoice for services rendered by a firm whose name she looked up and found did not appear to be registered with the Barreau du Québec. She wrote them up in a clean single-page memo, dated it, and left it on the kitchen table on a Thursday morning. "You're not afraid of this," he said, not quite a question. "I'm afraid of a lot of things," she said. "I'm not afraid of numbers. And I'm not afraid of telling the truth about them, even here. Especially here," she said. "If I pretend not to see things, I'm useless to you. If I'm useless to you, I have no standing. I've done the math." He looked at her for a long moment. There was something in his face she couldn't name yet. Not warmth, not interest exactly, something more like attention, the real kind, the kind that costs something to give. "There's an account I need audited," he said. "It goes back 4 years. The person who was managing it is no longer with us." "No longer with the organization," she said. "No longer anywhere," he said flatly. She nodded once. "I'll need the full transaction history and any correspondence that references the account." He had it to her by morning. It took her 6 days to work through it. The account was a mess. Not a complicated mess. Actually, that would have been better. A complicated mess implied craft. It was just a careless mess, the kind made by someone who knew they weren't being watched and had stopped trying. Money moving through 3 jurisdictions without proper documentation. Payments logged as one thing, clearly being another. A pattern that repeated on a near-monthly basis, that when you graphed it out, traced very cleanly back to a single point of origin she was willing to bet Caulfield already suspected. She presented it to him in the same room with the long table. He listened without interrupting, which she'd come to understand was how he did most things. When she was done, he said, "That name at the end." "Yes," she said. "You're certain?" "I'm certain of the numbers," she said. "What they mean is your area." He was quiet. "Then you could have buried that. You could have flagged everything else and left that clean." "I could have," she said. "I didn't." "Why not?" She thought about it for a moment, genuinely. "Because I've spent 6 years of my life managing books for people who cooked them," she said. "My stepfather, Bennett. The firm hired me because I was good and then asked me to look the other way on 2 client files, and I didn't, and they let me go quietly, and I needed the reference, so I let them. I'm tired of looking the other way. It doesn't suit me." Something changed in the room. She couldn't have said what. "The debt," Caulfield said. She looked at him. "Bennett's 460, he said. "I had it looked at. The compound rate wasn't disclosed." "I know," she said. "The enforceable amount is closer to 280, he said, and 14 months of payments at your rate would bring it to approximately 245. She was very still. "You've nearly cleared it," he said. "I didn't know that," she said carefully. "I know you didn't." He looked at the documents on the table. "You can go. If you want to go, I'll have Greer arrange the paperwork." The room was very quiet. Through the window, she could see the lights of the city and the dark shape of the river and the sky going pale at the edge with the particular grey of a Montreal February morning. "The account with the 4-year discrepancy," she said. "There are 2 more that were managed by the same person. I haven't touched them yet. If the pattern holds, and I believe it does, the total exposure is considerable." Caulfield didn't say anything. "I'd want proper compensation," she said. "Not a favor, a rate. Documented." "You're negotiating," she said. "I'm always negotiating," she said. "I just usually don't have anything to negotiate with." She stayed. The days had a shape now. Mornings with the accounts. Afternoons sometimes with Greer going over logistics. Twice a week with Arlo, who turned out to have run marine freight for 15 years before his knee went, and who was the most encyclopedic source of shipping regulation she'd ever met. Price checked in on her in the evenings without making it obvious she was checking in. She didn't see Caulfield every day. When she did, it was almost always about work, which suited her. He was clear. He asked precise questions. He didn't talk around things. She'd worked for men who thought vagueness was power, and she had always found it exhausting. Once, in the 3rd week, she came into the kitchen at 2 in the morning because she couldn't sleep and found him there. He was sitting at the table with a glass of water, not looking at anything in particular. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in some time. Not tonight. In general. She made herself tea. She sat down across from him, not next to him, because the table was long and proximity felt like a claim she hadn't earned. "The Renault file," she said, by way of explanation for being awake. "There's nothing in the Renault file worth losing sleep over," he said. "There are 3 layered transfers I keep tracing back to the same numbered company," she said. "It's bothering me the way a wrong number bothers you even when it's small." He almost smiled. She noticed because it was so brief, a shift at the corner of his mouth there and gone like a door opening an inch and closing. "Go back to bed," he said. "The Renault file will still be wrong in the morning. Will you?" she said. And then immediately, "I meant, will you be up?" "Sorry." That came out strange. "Probably," he said. She went back to bed. She lay in the dark and thought about the particular loneliness of powerful people, which was different from ordinary loneliness. Quieter, more load-bearing. She found the Renault file's problem by 10 the next morning. It wasn't the numbered company. It was the timing. The transfers were being triggered by a date pattern that didn't match any of the declared transaction purposes, which meant someone had automated them and then obscured the automation. Clever. Not clever enough. She wrote it up and slid it under his office door. He knocked on her door at noon. "Where did you learn to read patterns like that?" he said. "University," she said, "and my mother's second husband, who was a compulsive liar. When you grow up watching someone hide things, you learn to see the shape of hiding." He was in the doorway. She was at the small desk they'd moved in for her. It was a strange domestic geometry. My mother was also good at hiding things, he said. It seemed to cost him something to say it. It's a skill that transfers, she said, usually to the wrong person. He looked at her. She looked back. There was something there that neither of them said. The fourth week was when things shifted. Not dramatically. The thing about real shifts is they're almost never dramatic. They're a change in the temperature of a room, the distance at which someone stands, what gets said out loud versus what used to stay quiet. Greer started copying her on correspondence without being asked. Arlo began factoring her observations into his planning meetings. Price stopped explaining where things were and started asking her opinion on logistics. She was being integrated the way all organizations integrate useful people, quietly and without ceremony. With Caulfield, it was different, more careful. He was a man who had learned to be economical with what he gave people. Not because he was cold, she understood now, but because he'd spent a long time in environments where generosity was a liability. You learned to account for everything, to give nothing that could be used against you. She understood that. She'd learned the same thing in a smaller life, with smaller stakes. The break came with a phone call. She was in the East Wing working when Price found her face unreadable. "There's someone at the entrance asking for you," she said. "Says he's your family. Bennett." Lorraine put down her pen. She went to the entrance. Bennett was in the lobby wearing his good coat, the one he saved for situations he needed to look credible in. He had the expression he always wore when he wanted something. Careful, a little wounded, working the angle before he even opened his mouth. "Lorraine," he said. "Thank God." "We've been worried." "No, you haven't," she said. "Come home," he said, "okay? Whatever this is, whatever arrangement you've made, we can figure it out differently. Stepdad is in bad shape. He needs a liver transplant he can't get because he hasn't stopped drinking," she said. "I looked into it. Twice. There's nothing I can do for that. You can come home," Bennett said, and for a moment something flickered in his face that might have been genuine. She'd always wondered how much of Bennett was real and how much was calcified self-interest, and she still didn't know. "You walked me up to a car," she said. "In the cold, like you were delivering something. I was trying to protect the family. You were paying a debt you ran up," she said. "With me, and I've been paying it back out of my own work, which you've never done, and it's almost clear, so." She looked at him. "I'll let you know when it's settled, Lorraine." Bennett. She said it the way she'd learned to say numbers she was certain of. Flat, grounded, not unkind, but not open. "Go home." He went. She stood in the lobby for a moment after, feeling the specific weight of a door that has closed properly, not slammed, just done. She didn't hear Caulfield come in. She turned and found him standing back near the corridor, and she understood he'd been there long enough to have heard most of it. She waited for something to be said about it. He said, "That took courage." "It took practicality," she said. "I've been giving courage credit for things that are just common sense for a long time, and I'd like to stop." He was quiet then. "Your rate. We haven't formalized it." "No," she said. "We should." "Yes," she said. "We should." The contract was clean. Fair, actually. More than fair, which surprised her less than it might have a month earlier, because she'd come to understand that Caulfield's ruthlessness was applied at the level of the transaction, not the person, and what he wanted from her was specific, and he was willing to pay properly for specific things. She signed it. He signed it. Price witnessed. That was month 2. Month 3 was when she started understanding the shape of the thing she was actually in. The organization was larger than she'd initially mapped. The port was the obvious piece, but there were insurance interests and commercial real estate and 2 legitimate businesses whose books she'd started reviewing that had clearly been acquired for reasons having nothing to do with profit margins. There were people in government, not on payroll exactly, but owed favors of the kind that never appeared in documents. There were old alliances and older grudges. She didn't ask questions outside her lane, but she paid attention. She had always paid attention. The threat came, when it came, from the name she'd surfaced in the 4-year account. The one Caulfield had not been surprised by. His name was Avery Holt. He'd been Caulfield's CFO for 8 years. He'd been skimming for 6 of them. When Lorraine's audit caught the pattern, Caulfield had moved on it quietly, and Avery Holt had moved first. She found out when Greer came to her door at 7 in the evening, jaw tight, and said the building was on lockdown and she should stay inside. She stayed inside. She also sat at the desk and worked through everything she had on Holt's accounts, because if this was what she thought it was, there would be a financial dimension to it, a transfer, a withdrawal, a repositioning of assets, and she might see it before anyone else did. She saw it at 9:43. She called through to the comms room. There was a pause, and then Caulfield's voice, and she could tell by the ambient sound he was not in the building. "There's a transfer," she said, "initiated 22 minutes ago from the Alberta Numbered Company. It's moving toward a routing account I tracked to Holt 4 weeks ago. If it completes, the assets become unreachable. How long do we have? At current processing speed, maybe 90 minutes before it routes out internationally." There was a brief silence. Then, "Can you stop it? I can file a regulatory hold through the Financial Intelligence Unit," she said. "Legitimate process, legitimate grounds. It flags the account for review and freezes the transfer for 72 hours. It's slower than. It's legal," she said. Another silence. "Do it," he said. She filed the hold from the East Wing desk at 9:47 using her own credentials, her actual name, her actual professional registration, clean documentation, legitimate grounds. She hit submit and then sat and looked at the screen and felt her hands were shaking only slightly. Greer came in an hour later to tell her the situation had resolved. She didn't ask what that meant. She already knew the money was frozen, and she'd heard enough of the building's ambient sounds over the past 3 months to understand what resolving a situation meant here. Caulfield came back to the building just past midnight. He found her in the kitchen. She was eating toast because she hadn't eaten since noon, and adrenaline does not actually replace food. He sat down across from her. He looked like a man who'd had a long night on top of a long month on top of a long decade. "The hold worked," he said. "I know," she said. "I tracked the processing. You used your name. It was the fastest legitimate method," she said, "and I wanted it to be legitimate. That's a risk for you," he said, "professionally." "I know," she said. "I decided the risk was worth it." He looked at her for a long moment. The kitchen was very quiet. The building had a specific sound when the lockdown ended, a sort of loosening, like a held breath released, and she'd been listening to it all night. "Why?" he said. She set down the toast. She looked at him directly, which she'd learned was the only useful way to look at him, because he read evasion immediately and correctly. "Because I'm here," she said. "Not because I had no choice anymore, because I made one." The room held that for a moment. "The debt is clear," he said. "It cleared last week. I was going to tell you. She absorbed that. And nothing," he said. "It's clear. You have the choice again." She looked at him. He looked back. Neither of them moved. "The 2 remaining accounts from the Holt era still need full audit," she said. "I'm probably 6 weeks out on the real estate files. And there's the insurance book that nobody has touched in 8 months, which is either very clean or very dirty, and I won't know until I'm in it." His voice, when he answered, was very level. "That's a lot of work." "Yes," she said. "The rate would need to be renegotiated," he said. "Given what happened tonight, the risk profile has changed considerably." She agreed. Something in his face shifted. Not the half-smile from before. Something slower. Something that had clearly been arriving for a while and had simply, finally reached the surface. "Lorraine," he said. It was the first time he'd used her first name. She noticed it the way you notice a door opening properly. "Caulfield," she said. "Sit down," he said. "I'll make the coffee." She sat. He moved to the kitchen. Outside, the city was still going. The river was still dark and wide and cold, and somewhere on it a freight barge was moving quietly through the February pre-dawn, carrying things from somewhere to somewhere else, the way everything in this city always had, by water, by calculation, by the careful balancing of what was owed against what was possible. She watched him make coffee with the same precision he brought to everything, and she thought about choice, and about what it means to stay somewhere, not because you have to, but because the math finally works in your favor, and because the books are genuinely interesting, and because there is a man in a kitchen at 1 in the morning who for the first time in her memory is doing something as uncomplicated and present as putting a cup down in front of her without expecting anything back. "Thank you," she said. He sat across from her. He wrapped both hands around his own cup. "Price is going to say she told me so," he said. Lorraine looked at him. "About what?" "About you," he said. "She said 2 weeks in that I was keeping you around because you were good at your job." "You were," Lorraine said. "Yes," he said. "And." She let that sit. Outside, the sky was beginning to go from black to the particular dark blue that happens just before the city admits its morning, that cold Canadian hour when everything is quiet and honest and the numbers finally balance. "And," she said.